What is up, ladies and gents? Noli here. Welcome to another Payday video. Today we're going to be finishing off the Jimmy character pack, taking a look at everything it has to offer. Yesterday we took a full look at the character himself and the rather complicated Maniac perk deck, and today we're going to be looking at the weapons added in this update entirely for free. As we come to the 31st of March, when of course a brand new heist is going to be added to the game for everyone to play with. So, to start things off, let's keep things simple and look at the melee weapon first and foremost. Now, the way I'm going to be looking at these weapons is going to differ a little bit from the way I have in the past. Instead of looking at weapons on their own at this point, I think the best way for us to review and analyze them is to look at them side by side with either a very similar weapon or a sort of best-in-class weapon that it is comparable to. So starting things off with the specialist knives, which rock a 30 base damage, 30 base knockdown, with 80 at full charge for both, charge time of 2 seconds, a range of 200, and a base concealment of 29. So not bad stats on paper at all, bearing in mind, of course, it's going to have a fast swing speed with that short charge time and relatively low damage and knockdown numbers. Those can, of course, be amplified through the use of skills to make a more melee-focused build. But I think the weapon that I think will naturally spring to mind that this is comparable to is, of course, the utility knife. It sits right next to it in the melee inventory screen, and they're virtually identical. So they have the same damage, knockdown, charge time. The only difference is the utility knife has slightly shorter range, however has the cap of 30 concealment. So when it comes down to deciding which of the melee weapons you want to use, the question just has to be, are you going to need to max out your concealment? If you do, because you're running a concealment build with something like dodge, or you're putting this inside a stealth build, utility knife all the way. Otherwise, you may as well make use of the specialist knife's additional range, and of course, it doesn't have bad concealment in the first place at 29, it's only 1 point short of the maximum. So it can still fit in those sort of concealment builds. It's just, do you need max? No? Go with the specialist knives. Another thing obviously to mention, aesthetics do matter in this game, and I really like how the specialist knives look, and their swings are satisfying, animation quality is good, and of course if you're playing Jimmy and you want to get a little insight into his character, these specialist knives are fantastic, because Jimmy of course is two men really. He is a more refined individual, and he's the character that we have in Payday, and these knives really do display that, because they're very cool sort of tactical knives, but you know, instead of you just running one, you got two, because you like to go a little bit crazy. So I like them, I think they fit thematically, and they're not a bad melee weapon at all. So, moving on to the brand new secondary we've got, we're going to take a look at this weapon in its akimbo form, in its primary form a little later on, but let's take a look at it as a submachine gun, up next to other SMGs in the class. Before I get into all the ins and outs of the Heather SMG, I'd like to start things off by saying that I like how this gun looks and I like how it feels, and I think one of the more important things about submachine guns in this game is actually their iron sights, because they tend to be uncomfortable to use with red dots. You want to make them as small on your screen as possible, and that's why you're picking that class of weapon, and the Heather does that really nicely. However, when we start to get in and look at the numbers, I find that this weapon is a little bit in no man's land, because really the way SMGs divide themselves up in the class, you have high concealment and low concealment. Generally, the very high concealment weapons have lower damage and or lower accuracy stability, whereas the ones which have lower concealment don't fit around those builds, but will generally be more combat ready. Now, the Heather SMG sits at 25, which is sort of no man's land. It's certainly gearing up more towards being a combat-focused weapon, but it has that sort of hybrid feel to it as well, where it can fit into certain concealment builds if you so wish. And I think that is kind of its failing, because the weapon we're actually going to compare it to is the Micro Uzi SMG, which is a pure concealment weapon. And the reason why, though these weapons don't necessarily fill the exact same purpose I'm going to be comparing them, is because I'm going to show you that in my eyes the Micro Uzi is actually a better SMG in terms of its combat ability, even though it has a higher concealment stat and is a little more versatile. So when we just look at it on paper, I've tried to keep these stats as base as possible and only put a couple of attachments on where needed. But the Heather SMG has a mag size of 32, which is identical to the Micro Uzi, and that cannot be modified. The total ammo is 160, rate of fire 750, damage is 40 based, mine is customized to 44.1, that's pretty insignificant. Accuracy sits at 52 base, but depending on how you modify the weapon, if you choose to modify for damage and stability, you're going to drop a couple of points of accuracy. Stability kicks off at 44, but is easily customizable up to 72 and higher, I believe. Concealment, as I've already mentioned, 25, and threat is relatively unimportant. So moving on to the weapon that we are comparing it to, the Micro Uzi SMG. As I said, same mag size, total ammo goes in the way of the Micro Uzi, rate of fire goes well in the way of the Micro Uzi, which is not always a good thing, because rate of fire, of course, is always going to mean your weapon's going to kick more, going to be harder to control, and sometimes your damage will not be as confirmable per bullet, which is why we see a greater overall total ammo. Damage on the Micro Uzi is at 40.9, so while this is lower, it's already hitting that 40 threshold, which is considered very powerful. Accuracy is where this gun really falls down, 24 compared to the 48 of the Heather. Stability, very high at 92. Of course, it's only getting that high because you're taking some hits in accuracy, but that's just how I modify my Micro Uzi to make it the concealment option I want. Concealment is actually at... hang on, let me just check the base value. Yeah, 29, easily customizable up to 30. In fact, this weapon can go all the way up to 31 if you have the stat boost on it. So it is a concealment dream, and again, threat relatively unimportant. So as you could tell, the Micro Uzi was winning there for a lot of important categories, and in the end, it's going to be a toss-up. Do you like these high rate of fire SMGs, or would you rather keep it at a more steady pace as the Heather does? I feel if you're able to control that rate of fire and confirm more bullets, the Micro Uzi is already a better SMG, and it has that better concealment value. That's how it is on paper, that's how the weapons stack up. Another important stack, of course, is the ammo pickup rate. You tend to find weapons with this higher ammo will have higher pickup rate. It sits with the walk-in closet perk deck skill at 8, roughly, on average for the Heather, and around about 11 for the Micro Uzi. So the Micro Uzi wins in that category as well. So that's why I'm saying I think the Micro Uzi is a better weapon overall. Of course, that doesn't go into all the details of the feel of the gun. You will have seen some firing range practice with both, and you will see that the Micro Uzi could go through more and more rounds of enemies before you run out of ammo, and your reload time is a little shorter. It just doesn't seem like the Heather can compete on that level, and that is kind of because it's somewhere lost in between as a poorly purposed SMG. So as such, I don't feel like it does very well in this category, and might not be something you mess around with an awful lot after the release week, though as I said, it feels good to use, and I do love those iron sights, which are all important, but it's not going to fit into any of my top builds. However, the primary weapon is a totally different story. When you bring two of these to battle, you're looking at a different weapon altogether. While the Heather SMG falls into that sad category of having different, yet sadly slightly weaker stats overall, the Akimbo Heather SMGs are very, very different. You've basically just got two of them. The mag size is going to be the same, the rate of fire is naturally going to be the same, your damage is going to be the same if you build them the same way, same thing with accuracy, and stability can also be brought up relatively high, as I said before. Of course, I haven't customized both weapons identically, so you see slight differences in them overall. Of course, the problem being that akimbo weapons are not generally affected by skills, so we don't see that boon to stability. Concealment sits at 25, which is more important, I think. You know, when we're talking about the concealment in secondaries, SMGs often have that sort of high concealment. 25 for a primary is a little more powerful. There are fewer primaries in the game that get that as a base, with the ability to customize with, say, a stat boost, and definitely make this an option in a sort of crit concealment build, and that is something that I have messed around with and have tried out, and it is great. Obviously, I was also trying to test Maniac at the same time, so that didn't work out fantastically, but I'm still feeling that the Akimbo headers have an awful lot of potential. Now, as I said, I wanted to compare them to another weapon, and the beauty of this is I've had a very hard time finding one too, because they are very unique in how they function. The best thing I have found is the minigun, one of my favourite weapons in the game. You're going to see on paper they're totally different weapons. But in function, they have a similar idea going on. The only difference really being is you're going to have to reload the heathers an awful lot more, but they have a much better ammo pickup. So there won't be that same sort of reliance on bringing ammo bags. Easy toss-up really, if you ask me. The minigun is overall a more powerful weapon still, but the headers definitely offer something a little bit different, and I hope they bring in a new field of akimbo weapons coming into these primary and secondary slots. So when we looked at those heather stats, may as well now compare them to the Vulcan minigun. Mag size is obviously not even worth comparing. It has 750 as base. Total ammo 750, also considerably higher. Rate of fire is at 3000. Again, much higher. Like I said before, that's not always a great thing, especially with weapons that are this inaccurate and inconsistent. But as far as pure DPS and the damage you're going to do to enemies like bulldozers, cloakers, tasers, the Vulcan's obviously going to win out there. But actually, the base damage of the Vulcan minigun is slightly lower, falling just below that all-important 40 level. Accuracy and stability aren't really worth talking about. This weapon flies all over the place, and its concealment sits at a base of 5. However, as we all know, it is now possible to do a full critical dodge build, even with the minigun. So it still has that option available to it. It's just obviously much harder to achieve and requires a much more specific setup. So why are they so comparable? Well, because they both shoot relatively quickly and are very hard to control. They need to be used very up close and personal. I found that their ammo also feels very precious, if only just because I found myself reloading the heathers all the time, and obviously with the minigun you only have a certain amount of ammo and you're barely going to fill it up from packs you find on the floor. As I said, I think the minigun is still probably a more powerful option. I still think it's one of the most powerful in the game. It's just not been properly tapped into yet by everybody. But the headers are still a load of fun. It feels like a slightly faster paced playstyle that's going to give you a little more room for you to pick secondary options. Now, of course, to use this weapon, you're either going to have to go all the way up into the Fugitive skill tree in order to get the Akimbos unlocked, or you're going to have to run the Hitman perk deck, which is a little better than it used to be as of a recent update, so that is certainly an option, and that might be the way I'd consider doing it. Bring this primary along as a high power, massively high potential weapon in your primary slot, and then set up the rest of your build to adhere to a different playstyle. You know, make yourself a supportive pistol user, or maybe a tanky shotgun user with the ability to bring along, I don't know, say a C4, or maybe even a turret. I like it. It leaves a lot of options open. It's certainly not a weak primary weapon at all. Not very skill dependent in any way, shape or form. But it's just not up there with the minigun if you ask me. So sadly, both of these DLC weapons do fall short of being best in class, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It'd be a bit silly if every single weapon we got was amazing. But the Heather SMGs, when placed in that akimbo slot and your primary weapon, are a load of fun. They feel different to other things in the game, which is always very important when it comes to new updates and DLCs these days. For me anyway, the game has been out a long time, and trying to find new and exciting things can become a challenge, and that's exactly what these are. So, still fantastically fun weapons to mess around with. I'm still a massive fan of the Jimmy character pack. Of course, you guys aren't coming here to see if you want to buy the DLC. You're coming here to see what I think of these weapons. So let me know down in the description below. Don't go there. You can't go there. Go down in the comments below and let me know what you guys are thinking. Where do the heathers stand? Do you actually like the secondary variant? Do you think I'm incorrect in my comparison with the Micro Uzi? Does it outperform it, though it performs a different role? All that sort of stuff. Great to discuss down there. That's a lot for watching this video, guys. I hope you're enjoying the regular service that I am now resuming again. I'm enjoying it massively. The video creating process is fantastic, and it's all that much better for me taking a big old break from it. So yeah, I hope you continue to enjoy, watch, and respond to my videos. That is it for this one, and I will see you all in the next one.